The Legio Custodes have a history that is entirely unique within the world of Warhammer 40,000. At first glance, they appear to share some similarities with the other gene-enhanced warriors of the Imperium, the arguably much more famous Adeptus Astartes. However, the Legio Custodes, also known as the Adeptus Custodes, the Custodes, or Custodians, are about as different to an Astartes as an Astartes is to a regular human being, which is to say, they are extremely different. They're practically different beings altogether. The Custodes are the Imperium's greatest defenders, its most ancient sect of warriors, and humanity's most elite fighting force. Amongst warriors, there is no comparison to the Custodes, and amongst the Custodes, there is no comparison to the OG himself, the first of the 10,000, the shield of the Emperor, the one and only Constantin Valdor. Now, in a later video, I will be talking in depth about the history of the Custodes, their mysterious origins in the Age of Strife, the role they played in helping the Emperor reunify Terra, the roles they played during the Great Crusade, and of course, the most abhorrent and devastating blight that they endured during the Horus Heresy, their catastrophic failure to protect the Emperor of mankind, a failure that they still live with 12,000 standard years later. But since I don't want this video to be 2 hours long, we're just going to talk about Constantine today. And of course, if you enjoy this video, there's nothing better you could do for my small channel than leaving a like or a comment to let me know. Thanks. Now, Constantin Valdor's story begins on Terra during the Age of Strife. Of course, as with all history in 40k, we must keep in mind that there is an ever-shifting layer of fog that covers all. Nobody knows for certain exactly when Constantin Valdor began his service to the Emperor. But what is known is that he first appeared during the unification wars on Terra, leading his fellow Custodes warriors and the forces of the Emperor in their conquest of the planet. Additionally, it is unknown if Valdor was the first true custodian or simply the first one to survive the incredibly secretive and arduous trials required to become one. And considering that generally only 1 in 1,000 or even 1 in multiple thousands survives the process, it isn't unlikely that Valdor was far from the first attempt by the Emperor to create his elite personal guard. As the unification wars came to their conclusion and the Emperor turned his gaze towards the Sol system and the galaxy beyond, the decision was made that a new generation of foot soldiers were needed. These new warriors were the Astartes, who would eventually be led by their gene fathers, the 18 Primarchs. Of course, this meant that the Astartes' predecessors, the Thunder Warriors, who had aided the Emperor and the Custodes in the unification of Terra, needed to be completely and utterly exterminated. And who else could be the man for the job? Why, the very same man who had previously overseen the Thunder Warriors in their centuries of battle. After Constantin Valdor oversaw the brutal and merciless culling of the ever-loyal Thunder Warriors, R.I.P. Thunder Warriors, the Emperor's conquest of the galaxy and search for his 18 Primarch sons could truly begin. And begin it did. As the Emperor personally led his Astartes warriors across the galaxy, they were reunited, legion by legion, with their Primarchs. And during those few hundred years, Valdor rarely left the Emperor's side. Despite Valdor's steadfast determination to prioritize protecting the Emperor at all costs, there existed countless whispers throughout the Imperium about his reputation as a warrior. It was said that he was the only other being in the galaxy, aside from the Emperor himself, to match the reputations of the Primarchs, the 18 greatest warriors humanity had ever created. In fact, there were many throughout the Imperium who thought of him to be on the same level as the Emperor's sons in terms of his martial prowess and physical and mental capabilities. However, Valdor and the Custodes as a whole differed massively from the Primarchs in their life missions. While the Primarchs functioned throughout the Crusade to bring about the holy justice and light of the Emperor to the people of the galaxy, aka killing anyone who didn't immediately join the Imperium, of which there were trillions, the Custodes played a more concentrated, low-key role, as not only the personal bodyguards of the Emperor, but also as his trusted advisors, and interestingly enough, his mental counterparts. This last role was perhaps the most important of all, as it is clear that no other human being in the galaxy had even a shred of hope to be able to mentally spar with the Emperor himself, save for Malcador the Sigillite. The Emperor was a man of practically infinite knowledge, allegedly, infinite wisdom, allegedly, and had lived for tens of thousands of years, allegedly. The fact that the Custodes could even engage the Emperor in dialogue that he found to be worth his time is mind-blowing, and Valdor was the greatest equipped of all of his Custodes siblings for the monumental task of daily conversation with the Big E. Valdor served by the Emperor's side for upwards of 1,000 standard years, from his creation as the first custodian until the day the Emperor was slain by his greatest son Horus in the event that marked the end of Horus's civil war and rebellion against his father. It was during the tail end of the Great Crusade, and a time when Horus was amassing his galactic army, making deals with the ruinous powers of the Immaterium, and recruiting his brothers to fight against the Emperor beside him, that Valdor was dispatched, alongside many fellow Custodes, the 6th Legion Space Wolves, and a cadre of the Sisters of Silence, to Prospero, the homeworld of the Thousand Sons Legion and their Primarch, Magnus the Red. To put things briefly, Magnus had completely f***ed up literally everything, by accident, admittedly, and through his arrogance and naivete had allowed a massive army of literal demons to invade Terra, within the Emperor's own palace. Rude. And in anger, the Emperor sent a party of forces to apprehend Magnus and his seemingly treacherous legion. If you'd like a more in-depth explanation of what is now known as Magnus's Big Oopsie, at least that's what we call it in my house, check out my video on the Thousand Sons, where we look at this whole period from the side of Magnus and his legion. Hashtag Magnus did nothing wrong. But anyways, during the immense and devastating Battle of Prospero, as the Thousand Sons literally laid their souls on the line to defend their homeworld, Valdor demonstrated his true value as a warrior. The Thousand Sons were unique amongst the 18 legions for one particular reason. Every legion had some warriors who were born with inherent psychic abilities, but these warriors were exceedingly rare. When we're talking about a legion with 100,000 Astartes warriors, they are likely to have a handful of psychics in their midst. The Thousand Sons were practically all psychic. Sources tend to give conflicting information, but it seems clear that every warrior within the legion had at least some level of psychic capability, though they did vary. Even so, the number of psychers within the Thousand Sons easily outnumbered all the psychers of all the other 17 legions combined. And those most powerful individuals operated in different sects within the Thousand Sons, specializing in unique psychic disciplines. One such discipline was precognition, the use of the powers of the Immaterium to see into the future. Magnus's most elite blade masters used this power to give them not only an edge in battle, but a guaranteed victory, for in seeing their opponents move before it happened, they were able to defeat their foes with ease. So, Constantin Valdor fought 30 of these future-seeing blade masters, one after another, and killed all of them. No psychic power, no cheating, no competitive edge. He just simply opened up a can of fancy wizard whoop-ass and started dishing it out. Appetizer, entree, main course, dessert. Did that analogy make sense? I don't know. Anyway, this is just one of many stories that can be used to substantiate the claims that Valdor is essentially unmatched throughout the galaxy in his martial prowess and sheer power. As I mentioned, it was at the culmination of the events of the Galactic Civil War that the Emperor made the ultimate decision to risk his life by doing battle personally against his fallen son Horus. In order to meet Horus aboard his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, suspended in orbit above Terra, the Emperor teleported himself away from the Imperial Palace and, having appeared aboard the Spirit, found himself separated from his Custodes guards. Although the Emperor would ultimately be victorious against Horus, completely shattering his soul and sending its immaterial essence in a million directions across the ethereal realm, the Emperor himself paid a massive cost. Horus, imbued with the infinitely evil powers of the gods of chaos, had mortally wounded him, cursing him to an existence that would see him balance for eternity on the knife edge of death. The Emperor would have to be interred upon the golden throne, motionless, breathless, lifeless, as the throne's magic and a daily ritual sacrifice of thousands of psychic souls would be all that kept him from fully succumbing to his otherworldly wounds. It was at this moment that the Custodes realized their greatest nightmare. They had been created with the express purpose of protecting the Emperor's life, of safeguarding his soul to ensure the glory of humanity, and they had ultimately failed. And even though they'd also been created to advise him and engage him in challenging conversations, well, you tell me, how the hell do you talk to this? Look at this guy. Big old 20-foot-tall zombie guy over here. And so, at this time, as his charge, his creator, his father, his companion, his closest friend, lay broken and physically dead upon the golden throne, Constantin Valdor, the first of the 10,000, the shield of the Emperor, the man tasked above all others to protect the sanctity of the Imperium, vanished. Literally no one knows what became of him, though there are rumblings of a mysterious figure who has made a great many enemies amongst those loyal to the Imperium and those loyal to the forces of chaos, including many of the traitor legions who turned against the Emperor during the Horus Heresy. This mysterious figure, known as the King in Yellow, is said to seek the true name of the Emperor, a feat thought impossible, a feat that no living being has ever been able to accomplish. And though this mysterious figure's motivations in seeking the Emperor's name are unknown, it is common knowledge among those familiar with the arcane that obtaining one's name grants some certain level of power and control over that individual. The power to capture that individual's soul, or the power to transport it, to give it power, to direct it back to where it needs to go. In the novel Penitent, Elizabeth Beckwin, an associate of the legendary Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn, was able to recover an otherworldly tome, rumored to contain, amongst many other groundbreaking revelations, the name of the King in Yellow himself, the true identity of the mysterious figure who had made enemies of everyone throughout the galaxy on his endless quest to learn the true name of the Emperor. And the first two words in that tome? Constantin Valdor. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like or let me know in the comments. And of course, let me know what 40k topics you'd like to see me explore next. And if you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching.